His Lordship is gracing us with his playful presence this morning, so if you hear any squeaking in the background, it's this toy sometimes. The toy sometimes squeaks while it rolls across the floor. You gonna go get it? No? That's okay. You can just lay in the sun if you want. Good morning. So, here is where we are right now. This is coming together very nicely. Today, what I'm going to do is work on finishing the seam allowances, and then tomorrow I can put on the straps for the bag, and then it's going to be all done. So the first thing I'm going to do is roll this hem over and pin it and tack it so that it's ready to stitch. And then once I do the tacking stitch along here, basically I'm going to tack this down first onto this edge, and then at the end here I'm going to turn around and use the same thread to tack the finished edge down to the middle panel of the bag so that nothing can get through there and I won't lose, you know, quarters and stuff in the bottom of the bag. So I messed up. I have two things that I would like to fix on this. One of them I just realized, and the other one I realized like a week ago in this process, but I needed to take a break before I could go back and fix it. So one of them is the seam that I just stitched down here. I was looking at the edge and it just looked kind of messy to me, the stitching. I know you can't see it from there, but the stitching here just looks kind of messy, and I was thinking about why, and I realized that on the first side, when I did this, I stitched it in a different way. So what I did was I did a modified running stitch on the seam line itself, and then after that I went back and I rolled and tucked the hem under, and that's when I used the hem stitch. So on this one I hem stitched it down on the inside first and then on the outside, but the problem with that is because of how it just stands, I guess, the stitching is very visible and it just kind of looks messy. So I'm going to take this out and do it again. The second thing I want to fix is the side panel. I literally don't know how I did this, but at first I cut it too short, and you remember earlier in the video I went back and I fixed it, and then I cut it too long, which on this side is not a problem because I haven't finished the edges yet. This one is tacked and ready to finish. This one still needs to be tacked down. So for this, I can just go in and trim this and it's fine. However, on the other side, I hadn't realized that it was too long yet here because for some unknown reason, I never added the line between the back panel and the flap. So I just lined this up with the end of the curve and started stitching. So now I have to take out like 2.5 inches of back stitching plus the finishing. So I guess I'll go ahead and do that because I want to make sure this looks good. I'm going to start by cutting the knot at the end of this stitching because even though that means I will have more stitching that I have to take out, I don't want to risk having this hemming come out because this is fine, this I can keep. The only one that I have to redo is this one. So once I've got this seam opened back up, essentially what I'm going to do is try and reuse as much of this thread as I can, because again, it's just going to be better if I have to tie a knot off in the middle of a seam as opposed to at a corner. It's going to make that a lot stronger and a lot less likely to come out. I am going to pin this down first along the edge, and then I'm just going to add a quick line of stitching. So here I'm taking the leftover thread ends, threading them very carefully through a needle. I'm using a larger needle than I usually would through 2 layers of denim because I have to thread 2 threads through it at the same time. And then I'm going to take a stitch that is a modified running stitch. It's going to be longer on the back and shorter on the front, and the front in this case is the bottom of the bag, just so that it's not easy to notice. So once this is all stitched down on the seam line right here, you can't see the stitching really because it tends to hide under the other turned over seam allowance. Now I'm going to actually do this correctly. So I'm going to roll this over, pin, tack, and then I'm going to take my thread that's currently on this side and then just run it back through in order to tack this down. Okay, I pinned this and tacked it with some lovely bright yellow thread, and now I'm going to take the same needle and thread that I used in order to stitch it down, and I'm going to come in and just do a hem stitch or a whip stitch along this end just to finish that up nicely. Okay, this is finally fixed. It's looking very sharp in my opinion, and that means that I have to face down taking out my own back stitching. My favorite. Alright, so here's the one I messed up so you can see where the actual stitching line is supposed to be, and I stopped sewing here. So that's fun and exciting. All right, here we go. So I'm doing the same thing that I did to fix the last mistake, where I'm re-threading my needle with the old thread. And then I'm just going to go ahead and finish off this last couple of stitches. I guess at least it's not more sewing to do. I just really hate taking out finished work and having to redo it. So to finish off this edge, I'm just going to go ahead and re-thread a needle with the tacking thread that is still here. And this actually leads very nicely into my last sewing task of the day, because that is to start finishing this outside edge here, which means that instead of having to just cut this off where I would be done, I can go ahead and use the extra thread from the 2.5 to 3 inches of extra felling that I did just to start felling down this edge as well. Okay, so for the strap, I am literally just starting with a bunch of, these are the seams that I cut off the jeans that I'm using. Sorry, needed to refocus there. Because really, I couldn't use these for anything else, but I was thinking of doing a braided strap for the bag, just made out of these seams. Then they won't be going to waste, and they're, you know, since they're sewn on both sides, most of them are pretty stable on the edges. You know, not all of them, but you know, most of them are pretty stable around the edges. So I'm gonna go for it. Let's see how this goes. So basically, to attach the different pieces of seam together in order to get a strip as long as I need for the bag strap, I have shoved the ends together and I'm going to do a ladder stitch to attach them. So let me zoom in and show you that real quick. So I'm starting with my 2 different pieces of seam held together like this, and I've started my thread underneath this one, and I'm going to put it under the other one and then bring it out, not like super far away, but let's say about 1/4 inch away from the join. Push it through, and then I'm going to go just a little bit over and then go back down so that the needle is between the different layers of denim. And then I'm going to put it underneath the other one so that again it's between the layers of denim. And I'm going to come out almost but not quite as far as where I had started it. Okay, so I have all of my seams seamed together, and the next step is to assemble them into a braid. So for that, I'm going to need one of these big pinchy crab clips. I got this, I want to say in like an art class in college. If you have a clipboard, especially a long clipboard, that would be ideal. I don't, but that would definitely work. So I'm gonna use my pinchy crab, and I want to say this is like a palette because it's got paint on it, but I'm using this side. You want something that's got a little bit of roughness to it because that will help hold this in place better while you are braiding it. So let's get that set up. So the first thing that I'm doing here is laying out my strips in the order that I want them to get started. Once I have them lined up against the top edge, I'm going to go ahead and put the pinchy crab in place to hold them there so that I can start braiding. So basically a 5-strand braid is similar to a 3-strand braid, except the one difference that I found was really helpful for learning is that if you're doing a 3-strand braid, you're trying to take each of the outside strands and then moving them into the middle. And with a 5-strand braid, what I found most useful is to start either from the left or from the right and take that one strand all the way across, just doing it over, under until you get to the other side, and then starting with the next one. It does take a lot of practice. I've been doing this for probably 11 years at this point, but it does make a really, really cool looking braid. So there's the first 2 stitches, for lack of a better term. So you can see I just took this one from the right and I took it all the way across to the left. And then I took the next one and I took it all the way across to the left. And now I'm gonna do that with the strand that started out in the middle. I am gonna start speeding it up at this point, but if you want to go back and like slow this section of the video down and watch it again, feel free. It takes a lot of practice and a lot of muscle memory. So after a few hours of braiding, I have my bag here, messenger bag strap here. I am ready to stitch them together. Now, if you look at the ends of these, you'll see that I haven't sewn them together, and I'll tell you why. So I don't want this to be having like all of the weight on one section of the bag. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put the strap all the way down the side of the bag. It'll be on the inside, but all the way down the side of the bag. And I'm going to essentially, at the bottom, I'm going to attach 2 of the braid pieces, 2 of the pieces of the braid to one corner and 2 of the braid pieces to the other corner, and the center one will just come down to the center. And I just want that to distribute the weight of the bag equally, so that there's no one point of the side seam and there's no one point of the strap that is being strained by the weight. And I'm also gonna sew this to the strap up and down the length of the side panel, because I just want to make sure that this bag lasts me a long time, that I can carry anything I need in it, that I don't have to worry about, you know, coming back and repairing holes in this bag until it's been, let's say, 5 years. So let's get to it. I'm starting by pinning the strap down in several different places to the side panel, and since this is so thick, I'm just having to pin straight down. There's no way that I can pin sideways like I usually do. Once I have this pinned in a couple places, I'm threading a very light, very small needle with some just regular basting thread, short pieces of it, and I'm going to baste this down across, so in a line that goes perpendicular to the strap, just in a couple places here to keep it in place so that I can stitch it. There's no way that I would want to stitch it like this with the pins just sitting in it waiting to stab me. So now that I have the strap attached to the side panel, all the way up and down the side panel, it is finally time for me to grab a very small, very sharp needle and start stitching these down. I'm going to start in the corner here. I've actually already done this one, but I'm working on the second one now. This one is going to come just down to the center. These I'm bringing over to this corner, and then I'm going to sew along each side all the way up and down the side panel. And there's going to be a couple points where I cross over so that it's going to hold the braid in place, hold it stable. I have finally finished getting these all stitched down so that they're not going to come up. And it's of note, I just wanted to point out that once I cut these, I'm going to be adding some fray check. Definitely recommend that. I just didn't feel like doing it on camera because it's probably not very interesting. Anyways, I am now going to go ahead and start stitching along the side of this. I'm going to stitch all the way up this side, all the way down the other side, and get the sense that this is probably going to take me quite some time, so if you will excuse me for the next 5 to 7 hours. Hello, it is wrap-up time. Now, normally I don't do wrap-ups for my projects. I wanted to do one for this bag because this is the first time I've ever made a bag, and there's a couple things that I think I would have done differently if I could go back and do this again. So I don't know if you could tell that easily, but at the top edge here, I started on this side and I went over, and you can kind of see that by the end of it I had figured out how to make it even, but right at the beginning it kind of like peaks where the seam is and then it comes down again, so that would have been really nice to I guess I should have like practiced before I did that. That's one thing. Another thing is you can tell that the bag doesn't have a lot of body to it. It's kind of like flopping around. So maybe adding like a little bit of interfacing would have been nice. But that being said, I don't really mind having a floppy bag. I just think it would probably look a little bit nicer if it had more body to it. If it was like, I don't know, it would look more crisp. And then the last thing is, so these looked pretty okay when I cut them, but if you look closer, they're all starting to fray now, and I know that I mentioned putting fray check at the bottom of each of the strips in the braid, but if I had known how much these were going to start fraying once I started handling this more, I probably would have gone back and just done fray check all along the edges. Yes, that would have taken a long time, but I think it would have ended up with something nicer. What I will probably end up doing is going back and sewing like a strip of fabric, at least on the underside, so that when I wear the bag strap, it's not constantly causing this to, you know, shred away. I think what I'm probably going to do is I will go back at some point in the next couple of months and make like a lining for this, so that the inside of the strap is not rubbing against anything else that I put in here, sketchbook, books, scissors, etc. And then I might add a thing of interfacing when I do that. Yes, I'm gonna have to make a video about this because otherwise it won't get done. So that's definitely gonna be happening. Look for that probably somewhere in like the winter months. Another thing that I wanted to talk about while you're here is, so I really enjoyed being able to make this in my new sewing space. That was awesome. It was really cool to just be able to leave the table as is with this project on it, know that I don't have anything else that I need to use the space for. For example, you know, I used to have to do this on my dining room table and then I'd have to clear the project away at the end of the day, and so that was zero fun sometimes. But I'm going to put this out there that it's not necessary to have a sewing room if you want to get into sewing. If you're new to this, you want to get into crafting, you know, I'm very privileged to be able to have this space. I have been sewing for 11 years now, and this is kind of the first time that I've had a workable sewing space. Like, yes, I've had a sewing space at all since probably last August, so, you know, about a year now. But the fact that I can go ahead and make this just a sewing space, just a room for me, is, you know, not everyone can do that. And so I recognize that there's a lot of privilege that goes into that. And I feel very lucky to be able to have created this space that I can use just for creative purposes. However, all of the things that I do, the only thing that you need for the kind of sewing that I do is, you know, a pair of scissors, a needle, thread, some fabric. You can like go thrift it if you'd like. Don't let anyone gatekeep you just because you want to get into sewing. Hello, Angus. Here, come here. Do you want to say hi to everyone? Don't even let the cat gatekeep you. He sometimes gets on top of my progress and gets on top of my projects and just sits there and hangs out. But, you know, I want people to feel like if you want to get into sewing, just do it. You know, don't let anyone tell you you have to have a fancy sewing space. Don't let anyone tell you you have to have a particular type of material, a particular pair of scissors. I mean, you know, I started my first couple of projects I cut out with like my school scissors that were left over from high school, when they had you get that little list of supplies at the beginning of every school year. You know, thrift fabric, get fabric from clothing that is falling apart. Whatever you need to do to build your skills, just do that in the moment. You don't need a fancy room with antique furniture and a table that the cat likes to sit on your projects on in order to do that. You know, just do what works for you. All I need to sew can fit in my nice new bag, and that's it. Anyways, thanks for joining me. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and stay tuned for my next video. This was supposed to be my August project. I realize it's coming out a little bit late, sorry. But I'll see you at the end of September with something else. And his lordship says it's time for me to just hang out with him, so.